The phone rang at 6:47 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was standing at my kitchen window in Toronto watching the November sky turn from black to that particular shade of gray that makes you feel like the sun has given up on the day before it even started. I had a cup of coffee in my hand, black, no sugar, the way I'd taken it for 40 years. And I was thinking about nothing in particular. Maybe the furnace filter I needed to change. Maybe the way the maple tree in my backyard had finally dropped its last leaves. The small, ordinary thoughts of a retired man who has learned to find peace in routine. My name is Michael Reed. I'm 63 years old. I spent 37 years as a structural engineer, designing bridges and overpasses and the kinds of infrastructure that people drive over every day without ever thinking about the calculations that keep them from plunging into rivers. I retired 2 years ago, not because I was tired of the work, I love the work, but because my wife Sandra died, and suddenly the office felt like a place I was hiding rather than a place I belonged. So I came home. I learned to cook things other than frozen dinners. I started walking 3 miles every morning, rain or shine, or the kind of Canadian cold that makes your nose hairs freeze. I called my daughter Emily every Sunday evening, and I visited my mother in Hamilton every other week, bringing her the butter tarts from that bakery she liked, the ones with the perfectly caramelized tops. I had built, I thought, a quiet life, a good life, a life where the biggest drama was whether the Maple Leafs would finally win a playoff series. Then the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, 416 area code, but not one in my contacts, and I almost let it go to voicemail. I wish I had. I wish I had let that call disappear into the digital void, let whatever message waited there remain unheard for another hour, another day. But I didn't. I picked up because that's what you do when you're 63 and retired, and a phone call might be the most interesting thing that happens to you all morning. Michael. The voice was familiar, though I hadn't heard it in nearly 8 months. My brother Victor. I have some difficult news. There are certain phrases that change the temperature of a room. Difficult news is one of them. I set my coffee cup down on the counter, carefully, precisely, the way I'd learned to handle delicate things over a lifetime of engineering. What's wrong? It's Mother. Victor paused, and in that pause I heard something that I couldn't quite identify. Not grief exactly, something else. Something that made the hairs on my arms stand up in a way that had nothing to do with the November chill. She passed away last night, in her sleep. The doctor said it was peaceful. The kitchen went very still. I have thought about this moment hundreds of times since then, replaying it in my mind the way you replay a car accident, looking for the instant where everything went wrong, where you could have turned the wheel differently. And what strikes me every single time is that my first reaction wasn't sorrow. It wasn't the gut punch of loss that you expect when someone tells you your mother is dead. It was something much stranger. It was disbelief, not the denial kind of disbelief, the kind where your brain refuses to accept what your ears have heard because the truth is too painful. This was different. This was the part of my brain that had spent nearly 4 decades analyzing structures, looking for weaknesses, identifying the places where stress would cause failure. That part of my brain was telling me very clearly and very calmly, something is wrong here. When did this happen? I asked, and my voice sounded steady, which surprised me. Last night, around 11, the care facility called me this morning. Care facility? I gripped the edge of the counter. Victor, what care facility? Mother lives in her own home. I was there 2 weeks ago. She made me tea and complained about the price of groceries. Another pause, longer this time. Michael, I didn't want to upset you. Mother's condition deteriorated rapidly over the past few months. The dementia, it got much worse. She couldn't care for herself anymore. I had to make arrangements. Dementia. The word hit me like a physical blow, and not because of what it implied about my mother's health. It hit me because it was a lie. I had seen my mother 14 days ago. 14 days. She had been sharp as a tack, sharper than me most days. We had played Scrabble and she had beaten me by 47 points, dropping quixotic on a triple word score with the kind of satisfied smile that said she'd been planning that move for 6 turns. We had talked about the news, about Emily's promotion at work, about whether I should finally get a dog for company. She had told me for the 1,000th time that I worked too hard at being alone, that Sandra wouldn't have wanted me to turn into a hermit. That woman did not have dementia. That woman was as mentally present as anyone I had ever known. "Victor," I said slowly, "I need you to tell me exactly what happened." "There's nothing to tell," she declined. "It happens with the elderly. You wouldn't know because you only visited occasionally, but I was there, Michael. I saw how bad it got. She didn't even recognize me at the end." The lie was so brazen, so completely divorced from reality that for a moment I wondered if I was the one who was confused. But no, I could still see her kitchen table, the Scrabble board between us, the way she had laughed when I accused her of cheating. I could still hear her voice. "It's not cheating, Michael. It's called having a superior vocabulary." "I want to see her," I said. "Where is she now?" "The funeral home is handling everything. I've already made the arrangements." "Without consulting me?" "You weren't available, and someone had to make decisions quickly." "You weren't available." The words were a slap, carefully designed to make me feel guilty, to make me feel like the absent son who had failed his mother, while Victor, the devoted caretaker, had shouldered the burden alone. It was a narrative I recognized because Victor had been constructing variations of it our entire lives. "When is the funeral?" I asked. "Friday, but Michael—" He let out a long sigh, the kind of performative exhale that was meant to convey reluctance, compassion, the weight of difficult truths. "I don't think you should come." "Excuse me?" Mother was very clear in her final wishes. She felt abandoned by you. She said some things toward the end that weren't kind. "I think it would be best for everyone if you let me handle this privately, to spare you the pain." I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, and I felt something crystallize in my chest. It was cold and hard and absolutely certain, and it was this: my brother was lying to me. Not about small things, not about details or timelines or matters of interpretation. He was lying about the fundamental fact of our mother's death. I didn't know how I knew it. I didn't have evidence yet. Didn't have anything except the memory of a Scrabble game and the wrongness in Victor's voice and the 47 years of experience I had with my brother's particular brand of manipulation. But I knew. "Thank you for telling me," I said, and I made my voice sound defeated, tired, like a man who had just accepted a painful truth. "I'll respect Mother's wishes. I think that's best." Victor's relief was palpable, even through the phone. "I'll send you information about the estate once everything is settled." "The estate?" "The house, the accounts, her possessions. Mother left everything to me. She updated her will 6 months ago, but don't worry. I'll make sure you receive something, for sentimental value." He hung up before I could respond. I stood there for a long time, phone in my hand, coffee going cold on the counter. The maple tree outside my window was completely bare now, its branches like bones against the gray sky. I thought about my mother, about Victor, about the 47 years of history that had led to this moment. And then I did something that I had never done in my entire life. I called in sick to my retirement, because I wasn't going to spend the day changing furnace filters and walking along the waterfront and accepting the quiet rhythms of an ordinary life. I was going to find out what the hell was actually going on. And if my brother thought I was going to disappear quietly, he had forgotten who he was dealing with. To understand what happened next, you need to understand Victor. My brother is 4 years younger than me, which means I remember things about our childhood that he doesn't. I remember what our family looked like before he arrived, before his particular kind of gravity began, bending everything in our household toward him. I remember our mother, Margaret Reed, young and hopeful and newly married, telling me that I was about to have the best gift a little boy could receive, a brother to play with, to grow up with, to have adventures with. I was 4 years old, and I believed her. The thing about Victor is that he was born charming, not handsome exactly, though he was that too with our father's strong jaw and our mother's bright eyes, but charming in a way that seemed almost chemical. People wanted to please him. They wanted to be noticed by him, approved of by him, chosen by him. Teachers gave him the benefit of the doubt. Girls giggled when he walked by. Our parents looked at him with a kind of wondering pride that they never quite managed to replicate when they looked at me. I was the steady one, the reliable one, the one who did his homework without being asked and mowed the lawn on Saturdays and never gave anyone a moment's trouble. I was the bridge, I suppose, functional, necessary, unspectacular. Victor was the fireworks. He was also a liar. I remember the first time I truly understood this. I was 10, Victor was 6, and our grandmother's antique vase had been knocked off the mantel and shattered across the living room floor. I hadn't done it. I had been in my room reading the way I spent most of my time. But Victor said he had seen me do it. He said it with tears in his eyes and a trembling lip and such absolute conviction that even I, standing there knowing I was innocent, began to doubt my own memory. Our father believed him. Why wouldn't he? Victor was 6 years old, and he was crying, and he said he had seen me do it with his own eyes. I was punished. No dessert for a week, extra chores, a lecture about responsibility and honesty that still makes me clench my jaw when I think about it. Years later, decades later, our mother told me the truth. She had come downstairs that day to find Victor standing over the broken vase, frozen with guilt, and had watched him construct his lie in real time, watched him decide that the punishment would be better absorbed by someone else. She hadn't said anything at the time because she didn't want to humiliate him, because she believed he would grow out of it, because she loved him and couldn't bear to see him shamed. That was the pattern of our childhood. Victor broke things, and I absorbed the consequences. Victor charmed his way out of trouble, and I paid his debts of accountability. Our mother saw and loved him anyway. Our father saw nothing because he didn't want to, because Victor was the son he had always imagined having, golden, effortless, destined for greatness. I learned over those years to stop fighting the narrative. I became what they expected me to be, solid, dependable, undemanding. I went to engineering school while Victor dropped out of business programs and found himself through a series of increasingly grandiose schemes. Married Sandra, my college sweetheart, and built a career and a life while Victor married 3 times and left a trail of burned bridges and unpaid debts across 2 provinces. And through it all, our mother loved us both. That was the thing about Margaret Reed. She saw Victor clearly, perhaps more clearly than anyone, and she loved him anyway. She also loved me in a different way, in the quieter way that steady things are loved. And I had made my peace with that, or thought I had. I had certainly made my peace with Victor. We spoke rarely, saw each other at holidays when schedules aligned, Exchange the kind of surface pleasantries that brothers exchange when they have run out of things to actually say to each other. He had never asked me for money, not because he wouldn't have been willing to, but because he knew I wouldn't give it to him. And I had never offered to help with his various disasters. We had reached, I thought, a kind of equilibrium, two parallel lines that would never intersect until the phone call. I didn't call my mother immediately after hanging up with Victor. I wanted to, desperately, but something held me back. Some instinct that said I needed to approach this carefully, strategically, the way you approach a structural failure that might collapse if you apply pressure in the wrong place. Instead, I called my daughter. Emily answered on the second ring. "Dad, it's early. Everything okay?" "I need you to do something for me," I said, "and I need you not to ask questions until I explain." My daughter is 34 years old, a forensic accountant who specializes in fraud investigation. She inherited my analytical mind and her mother's warmth, and she is one of only 3 people in the world whose judgment I trust completely. The other 2 were Sandra, who is gone, and my mother, who was apparently dead. "You're scaring me," Emily said. "Good, you should be scared, because either I'm losing my mind or your grandmother is alive, and your uncle just told me she's dead." Silence on the line, then, "Tell me everything." I did. The phone call, the claims of dementia, the funeral I wasn't invited to, the inheritance that had somehow bypassed me entirely. Emily listened without interrupting, the way she did when clients brought her tangled messes of financial records and asked her to find the fraud hiding in the numbers. When I finished, she said, "I visited Grandma 3 weeks ago. She made me her famous apple crumble and told me I was working too hard. She was fine, Dad. She was completely fine." "I know." So either she declined catastrophically in the past 3 weeks, which is possible but unlikely, or Uncle Victor is lying. That's my assessment. "Okay." Emily's voice shifted, becoming crisp and focused, the voice she used when she was about to tear apart someone's fraudulent tax returns. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to call the care facility Victor mentioned. Find out when she was admitted, what her diagnosis was, who her doctor is. I'm going to check the provincial registry for any power of attorney filings. If Victor had her moved to a care facility, he needed legal authority to do it. And if we find out he's lying, then we find out why." Emily paused. "Dad, I don't want to say this, but I have to. If Uncle Victor is lying about Grandma being dead, there are only a few reasons he would do that, and none of them are good." "I know," I said again. "That's what terrifies me." The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, each one more disturbing than the last. The first call was to my mother's house. It rang and eventually went to voicemail, her voice, warm and familiar, asking callers to leave a message after the beep. I hung up without speaking. The second call was to the care facility. It took some digging to find out which one. Victor hadn't given me the name, but eventually I tracked it down through a Google search of residential care homes in the Hamilton area that had recently reported a patient death. Sunrise Gardens. It sounded pleasant, the kind of name that was designed to make you forget you were putting your parent in an institution. "I'm calling about my mother," I said when the administrator answered. "Margaret Reed. I understand she passed away last night." There was a pause on the line. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not able to confirm patient information over the phone. Privacy regulations. You understand. My brother Victor called me this morning to tell me she died. I'm trying to arrange to see her, to say goodbye, but he's handling the arrangements, and I don't have all the details." A longer pause. "Sir, I really shouldn't, but I can tell you that we have had no patient deaths in our facility in the past week. If your mother passed away, it wasn't here." The ground shifted under my feet. Are you sure? Completely sure. We're a small facility. I would know. Is there a patient named Margaret Reed in your care? Elderly woman admitted in the last few months. Sir, I'm not able to. Please. My voice cracked and I didn't try to hide it. I'm trying to find my mother. I don't know if she's alive or dead. I don't know where she is. I'm asking you, as one human being to another, to help me. The administrator sighed. I could hear the conflict in it, the battle between regulations and basic human decency. I shouldn't be doing this, she said finally. But no, there's no Margaret Reed in our facility. There never has been. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. If my mother wasn't at Sunrise Gardens, where was she? If she wasn't dead, why had Victor told me she was? And if she was dead, why had he lied about where? My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Found something, calling you now. 3 seconds later, she did. Dad, I pulled the Provincial Power of Attorney registry. Victor filed emergency guardianship papers for Grandma 4 months ago. He cited severe cognitive decline and inability to manage her own affairs. The filing was approved by a Dr. Harrison Metz at Hamilton General. 4 months ago. I did the math. That was June. I saw her in June. She was fine in June. I know. There's more. The guardianship gave Victor control over her finances, her medical decisions, and her living arrangements. 2 weeks after it was approved, he transferred power of attorney to himself exclusively. You were supposed to be notified, but the notification was sent to your old address, the one you moved out of 3 years ago. The address Victor had. The address Victor had volunteered to update in the family records and apparently never had. He planned this, I said, and it wasn't a question. It looks like it. Dad, there's something else. I ran a preliminary check on Grandma's financial accounts, the ones I could access through family trust records. There have been significant withdrawals over the past 4 months. Large amounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars. How much? I don't have exact figures yet, but it looks like most of her liquid assets have been moved, and her house... Dad, her house was put on the market 3 weeks ago. The listing agent is a friend of Victor's. I sat down heavily on my kitchen chair. The coffee was ice cold now, but I didn't care. I was thinking about my mother's house, the house where I had grown up, where Victor and I had been children, where my father had died 12 years ago holding my mother's hand, the house that Victor was apparently selling out from under her. We need to find her, I said. We need to find her right now. I'm already on it. I'm taking the afternoon off work. I'll pick you up in an hour and we're driving to Hamilton. Emily, don't argue with me, Dad. This is Grandma. This is family. And if Uncle Victor thinks he can do whatever he's doing without anyone noticing, he's about to find out that he was very, very wrong. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there in my kitchen, in the home I had built from the ruins of my grief, and I thought about family, about what it meant, about the blood that tied us together and the choices that tore us apart. And I thought about my mother, sharp, stubborn, brilliant Margaret Reed, and I refused to believe that she was dead until I saw proof with my own eyes. Whatever Victor had done, whatever lies he had told, I was going to find the truth, even if it destroyed us both. Emily picked me up at noon, driving her practical Honda Civic with the intensity of a woman on a mission. She had printed out stacks of documents during her lunch break, financial records, guardianship filings, property listings, and they sat in a folder on the passenger seat, a paper trail of potential fraud. I've been thinking, she said as we merged onto the highway toward Hamilton, about why Uncle Victor would tell you Grandma is dead. There are only 2 possibilities, I said. Either she is dead and he's lying about the circumstances, or she's alive and he's lying about everything. Right, so let's game this out. Emily drove the way she approached her work, methodically, carefully, leaving nothing to chance. If she's dead, why lie about the care facility? Why make up a dementia diagnosis? Why try to keep you away from the funeral? Because something about her death was suspicious. Because he doesn't want me asking questions. Exactly. And if she's alive? I had been avoiding this possibility, the one that was too terrible to fully contemplate. If she's alive, then Victor has hidden her somewhere. He's faked her death to, what? Steal her money? Claim her inheritance early? Force through the sale of her house without her consent? All of the above, maybe. Emily's jaw tightened. Dad, I see cases like this at work. Elder financial abuse. It's more common than people think. Adult children who get desperate, who convince themselves that they deserve the money now rather than waiting for an inheritance. They get power of attorney through dubious means, move assets, sometimes even fake medical diagnoses to justify their control. Victor has always been desperate, I said. He's always been chasing some scheme, some get-rich-quick plan, but this? Faking our mother's death? Desperate people do desperate things. We drove in silence for a few miles, the November landscape rolling past, gray and brown, and stripped of all pretense. I thought about Victor, about the brother I had known for 60 years, and I tried to reconcile the charming, careless man of my memories with someone capable of this kind of calculated cruelty. It wasn't as hard as I wanted it to be. Where are we going first? I asked. Her house. Even if it's on the market, we need to see if anyone's there. If she's been moved, someone might know where. My mother's house was a modest brick bungalow in a quiet Hamilton neighborhood, the kind of street where people mowed their lawns on Saturdays and looked out for each other's packages. It had been in our family for 43 years, bought when Victor was a baby, filled with memories of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and the slow accumulation of a life. There was a for sale sign in the front yard. Emily parked across the street, and we sat there for a moment, staring at the sign like it was an accusation. Sold, it said in red letters across the diagonal. Sold. 3 weeks, Emily said quietly. 3 weeks to list and sell a house. That's fast. Too fast. Unless the buyer already had a deal in place. Unless this was planned. I got out of the car before she could stop me, walking across the street with the kind of purposeful stride that comes from 40 years of construction sites and engineering reviews. If someone was inside, I was going to talk to them. If no one was there, I was going to find out who had the keys. The front door was locked, but through the window I could see the living room, empty, completely empty, the furniture that had been there for decades, the photographs on the walls, the rugs that my mother had brought back from a trip to Morocco 20 years ago. All of it was gone. The house looked stripped, hollow, like a body with the soul removed. Dad? Emily had followed me, and now she was pointing at something in the corner of the window, a business card taped to the inside of the glass. Victor Reed, estate representative. Inquiries. Phone number. Estate representative. As if our mother was already dead, as if her life had already been packed away and sold off and reduced to a business card in an empty window. We need to talk to someone, I said. A neighbor, someone who saw what happened. The house next door belonged to Mrs. Kapoor, a widow in her 70s who had lived there almost as long as my mother had. I remembered her from my childhood. She had brought over casseroles when my father was sick, had watched Victor and me when our parents needed a night out. She would know something. She had to. She answered the door on the second knock, and her face went through a complicated series of expressions when she saw me. Recognition, then confusion, then something that looked very much like relief. "Michael," she said. "Oh, Michael, thank God you're here." "Mrs. Kapoor, I'm looking for my mother. Do you know where she is?" She ushered us inside quickly, glancing up and down the street as if watching for someone. Come in, come in. I've been so worried. Ever since they took her away, I've been calling the numbers they gave me, but no one tells me anything." "Who took her away?" "The men, in the van. It was 3 months ago, maybe 4. Your mother was upset. She didn't want to go. But your brother said it was for the best. He said she wasn't well." "She wasn't well?" Emily asked carefully. "In what way?" "That's just it." Mrs. Kapoor wrung her hands, her eyes bright with distress. "She seemed fine to me. We had tea the week before. She was sharp as ever, complaining about Victor's latest scheme, worried about money. She said Victor had been pressuring her to sign some papers, something about the house. She didn't want to do it." "Did she sign them?" "I don't know. The next week the van came, and then the house went up for sale, and now it's sold, and I don't know where Margaret is, and when I ask your brother, he tells me to mind my own business." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Mrs. Kapoor, did my brother ever mention anything about a care facility? A place called Sunrise Gardens?" "No, nothing like that. He just said she was being taken somewhere safe, somewhere she could be looked after. But the way she looked when they put her in the van, Michael, she didn't look like someone who wanted to go. She looked scared." Emily and I exchanged glances. The picture was becoming clearer now, and it was uglier than either of us had imagined. "We're going to find her," I said, and I meant it as a promise to Mrs. Kapoor and to myself. "We're going to find out exactly what happened." The next 2 days were a fever dream of investigation, each revelation worse than the last. Emily took leave from work and threw herself into the financial trail with the intensity of a bloodhound. She tracked my mother's bank accounts, her investment portfolios, her pension payments. The picture that emerged was devastating. "He's been draining her systematically," Emily said on the second evening, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "Look at this. Starting 4 months ago, right after the guardianship was approved, there are regular transfers from her main account to an offshore holding company. 15,000 here, 20,000 there. Over the past 4 months, he's moved almost $600,000. 600,000? I stared at the numbers, trying to make them make sense. "My mother doesn't have that kind of money." "She did, from the house sale, from Dad's pension, from her own retirement savings. It was there, Dad, and now it's not." "Where did it go?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Emily pointed to one of the documents. "This holding company is registered in the Cayman Islands. No public ownership records. It could be Victor's, or it could belong to someone he's working with." "Working with?" "Dad, this is sophisticated. The power of attorney filing, the fraudulent medical diagnosis, the rapid asset liquidation. Victor's not smart enough to do this alone. He's getting help from someone." I thought about that. Victor was many things: charming, manipulative, perpetually convinced that the rules didn't apply to him, but he wasn't a planner. He wasn't someone who thought 3 moves ahead. His schemes had always been impulsive, reactive, the financial equivalent of throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something would stick. This was different. This was methodical. This was calculated. "We need to find the doctor," I said. "The one who signed off on the dementia diagnosis. Dr. Harrison Metz." "Already on my list." Emily pulled out her phone. "I found his practice records. He's a geriatrician at Hamilton General, been practicing for 30 years. By all accounts, he's well respected." Well-respected doctors don't usually sign fraudulent guardianship papers. No, they don't, which means either he was fooled or he was paid. Can we find out which? Emily smiled, the sharp, predatory smile of a forensic accountant who had found the thread that would unravel the whole tapestry. I'm going to pay him a visit tomorrow. Care to join me? Dr. Harrison Metz had an office on the 5th floor of a medical building adjacent to Hamilton General. The waiting room was pleasant enough, soft chairs, soothing watercolors, the kind of generic classical music that's supposed to make you forget you're about to discuss mortality, but barely noticed any of it. I was too focused on the door marked consultation room, behind which answers might be waiting. We had made an appointment under false pretenses. Emily had called the day before, claiming to be concerned about her elderly grandmother's cognitive decline, asking for a consultation about diagnosis procedures. It was a lie, of course, but it got us through the door, and that was what mattered. Dr. Metz was a soft-spoken man in his 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes, and the practiced bedside manner of someone who had delivered bad news thousands of times. He looked, I thought, like exactly the kind of doctor you would trust with your mother's care, which made what I was about to accuse him of even harder. "Mr. Reed," he said when Emily introduced me, "I wasn't expecting, that is, your appointment was for your granddaughter." "My mother is Margaret Reed," I said, cutting him off. "You signed a medical evaluation 4 months ago certifying that she suffering from severe dementia and was unable to manage her own affairs. I want to know why." The color drained from his face. It was subtle. He was practiced at maintaining composure. But I saw it. The flicker of fear, the recognition that he had been caught in something he hadn't expected to answer for. "I'm not sure what you're implying," he said carefully. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. My mother did not have dementia. I saw her regularly. She was cognitively intact. She beat me at Scrabble 3 weeks before you signed that evaluation. So either you made a catastrophic diagnostic error or you were lying." Silence in the consulting room. The classical music played on, oblivious to the confrontation unfolding beneath it. "Dr. Metz," Emily said, her voice smooth and professional, "I work in forensic accounting. Specifically, I investigate financial fraud. I'm very good at following money. If there's anything you need to tell us about my grandmother's diagnosis, anything that might explain irregularities in the paperwork, now would be the time." More silence. Then slowly, Dr. Metz's composure began to crack. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I didn't know I was told she was declining. Her son brought her in, explained the symptoms. I did a brief evaluation. She seemed confused, disoriented, but in retrospect, I should have been more thorough." "Seemed confused?" I repeated. "My mother is one of the sharpest people I know. That's what I'm telling you. I think—" He took a deep breath, seeming to come to a decision. "I think she was drugged." The word hung in the air between us. "Drugged," Emily said flatly. "You're saying someone deliberately impaired her cognitive function before bringing her to you for evaluation?" "I'm saying that the woman I examined did not present as a typical dementia patient. Her symptoms were too uniform, too convenient. It's the kind of cognitive impairment you see in patients, I'll say so, who have been given sedatives. Benzodiazepines, specifically. They cause confusion, memory problems, disorientation. All the symptoms of dementia in their acute phase." "And you didn't think to test for that?" Dr. Metz's face crumpled. "I should have. I know I should have. But her son was so insistent, so concerned, and I had no reason to suspect. Why would a son drug his own mother?" "For money," I said. "For a house. For an inheritance he didn't want to wait for." "Mr. Reed, I assure you, I had no idea." "Did Victor pay you?" Emily asked. "Was there money involved in any of this?" No. Dr. Metz shook his head vehemently. Absolutely not. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake, but I wasn't bought. I was fooled. There's a difference. I studied his face, looking for the tells that I had spent a lifetime learning to read. He seemed genuine, terrified, ashamed, but genuine. Where is she now? I asked. Where did Victor take her after your evaluation? I don't know. Signed the paperwork, and that was the end of my involvement. I assumed she was being placed in appropriate care. She wasn't. Emily pulled out her phone, showing him the documents we had gathered. She wasn't placed anywhere on official record. There's no admission to any care facility in Ontario under her name. It's like she vanished. Dr. Metz looked at the documents, and his face went even paler. My God, he said, what has he done with her? That was the question that kept me awake at night, that made me drive past my mother's empty house, that whispered in the back of my mind every time I thought about Victor's phone call. She passed away last night, in her sleep. The doctor said it was peaceful. A lie. All of it a lie. But built on what foundation of truth? Where was my mother? Was she alive? Was she being held somewhere against her will, drugged into submission while her son stole everything she had? Or had something worse happened, something that Victor's death announcement was designed to cover up? We need help, Emily said as we left the medical building. Real help, legal help, someone who can force Victor to tell us where she is. She was right. This had gone beyond what two people could handle alone. We needed investigators, lawyers, people with the authority to compel answers, and we needed them fast. Because somewhere out there, my mother was waiting, and every day that passed was a day Victor had to cover his tracks, to deepen whatever scheme he had constructed, to make the truth harder and harder to find. I wasn't going to let that happen. I had spent my entire life being the reliable one, the steady one, the one who didn't make waves. But some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth burning bridges for. Family, real family, was one of them. The private investigator came recommended by a colleague of Emily's, a woman named Sandra Chen, who specialized in missing persons cases. She was small and quiet, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and a reputation for finding people who didn't want to be found. I've seen cases like this before, Sandra said when we met with her in her cramped Toronto office. Elder abuse masked as care. It's depressingly common. The abuser isolates the victim, creates false narratives about their mental state, drains their resources. Sometimes the victim dies before anyone realizes what's happening. My mother isn't dead, I said, and I wasn't sure if it was a statement or a prayer. Maybe not, but if she's alive, she's probably being held somewhere unofficial. A private home maybe, or an unlicensed care facility. Somewhere your brother can control the narrative. Can you find her? Sandra smiled, a thin, humorless smile. That's what I do, Mr. Reed. But I need you to understand, if your brother has gone to these lengths to hide her, he's not going to give her up easily. Whatever we find, it's going to lead to a confrontation. I'm ready for that. Are you? Because right now, your brother thinks he's won. He thinks you believed his story about your mother's death, that you've accepted being cut out of the funeral, that you're going to fade into the background while he collects his inheritance. The moment he realizes you're investigating, everything changes. He'll move her, destroy evidence, maybe do something worse. I thought about Victor, about the brother I had known all my life. The lies, the manipulation, the easy cruelty that he disguised as charm. Could he hurt our mother? Really hurt her beyond what he had already done? I didn't want to believe it, but I didn't not believe it either. Find her, I said. Find her before he has a chance to do anything. Sandra nodded, making notes on a yellow legal pad. I'll start with the financial angle. Follow the money, find the assets, find where they're being stored. If your brother moved your mother, he had to move her somewhere. That somewhere requires rent, utilities, supplies. There will be a trail. What can we do? Emily asked. Keep your brother talking. Make him think you've accepted his story. The longer he thinks he's gotten away with this, the more careless he'll be. I didn't like it. I wanted to confront Victor immediately, to shake him until he told me where our mother was, to make him face what he had done. But Sandra was right. Patience was a weapon. Information was a weapon. And when the time came, I intended to be very, very well armed. 3 days later, Sandra called with news. I found something, she said. Your brother rented a property 6 months ago, a farmhouse about an hour outside Hamilton in a rural area. Cash payment, no lease agreement on record. Very private, very isolated. You think she's there? I think it's worth checking. I drove by yesterday, didn't stop, didn't want to spook anyone, but there were lights on inside. Someone's living there. My heart hammered in my chest. Can we go? Now? Not without a plan. If your mother is there and your brother is holding her against her will, we need to involve the police. This isn't something you can handle on your own. The police? Emily sounded skeptical. Will they even take this seriously? We don't have proof of anything except financial irregularities. We have more than that. Sandra's voice was grim. I found something else while I was digging. Your brother owes money to some very unpleasant people. Gambling debts mostly, but also failed business ventures with investors who don't appreciate losing their stakes. He's desperate, Mr. Reed. Desperate people are dangerous. Gambling debts, failed businesses. It was the pattern of Victor's entire life, compressed and intensified, with our mother's wealth as the stakes. How much does he owe? I asked. Based on what I could find? Close to $2 million. $2 million. My mother had been wealthy, yes, but not that wealthy. Even if Victor drained every asset she had, he would still be short, which meant he had other plans, other ways to extract value from her estate. The house sale, the fraudulent death announcement. It was all starting to make a terrible kind of sense. He's planning to fake her death officially, I said slowly. File a death certificate, collect the insurance, inherit whatever's left, then disappear before his creditors catch up with him. That's my assessment, Sandra said, which means we're running out of time. If he thinks his scheme is working, he might move to finalize it soon. We need to get to your mother before that happens. What do you suggest? Tomorrow morning, you, me, your daughter, and a police contact I trust. We go to the farmhouse. If she's there, we extract her. If she's not, we at least know we're on the right track. I looked at Emily, who nodded. Her face was pale but determined, the face of a woman who had inherited more than just her mother's analytical mind. Tomorrow, I said, we'll be ready. That night, I barely slept. I lay in my bed in my quiet Toronto house, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my mother. I thought about her as a young woman, the mother of my childhood, who had read me stories and bandaged my scraped knees and told me I could be anything I wanted to be. I thought about her as an older woman, the grandmother who adored Emily, who had helped me through the darkest days after Sandra's death, who had told me over and over that life was worth living even when it didn't feel that way. I thought about her sharp wit, her stubborn independence, her refusal to be diminished by age or circumstance. The woman who had beaten me at Scrabble 3 weeks before she was supposedly unable to care for herself. And I made her a promise there in the dark of my bedroom, with the November wind rattling the windows and the maple tree scratching against the glass like a bony finger. I'm coming, Mom. I'm coming, and I'm bringing you home. Whatever Victor had done, whatever depths he had sunk to, I was going to undo it. I was going to find my mother and make sure she was safe and watch my brother face the consequences of his choices. Not for revenge, not for the satisfaction of seeing him punished, though I won't pretend that wasn't part of it. For justice, for truth, for the simple fundamental principle that people should not be able to do terrible things and walk away unscathed. For family, real family, the kind that isn't defined by blood or inheritance, but by love and integrity and showing up when it matters most. The farmhouse sat at the end of a long gravel driveway surrounded by empty fields and naked trees, and the kind of silence that feels oppressive rather than peaceful. It was early morning, the sky still gray with the last remnants of night, and frost glittered on the dead grass like scattered diamonds. There were 5 of us, me, Emily, Sandra Chin, a police officer named Detective Maria Santos, who specialized in elder abuse cases, and a uniformed officer who stayed by the vehicles in case backup was needed. We had approached quietly, parking our cars a quarter-mile down the road and walking the rest of the way, our breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "There's movement inside," Sandra said quietly, watching the house through binoculars. "I see at least 2 people. One of them is in a chair by the window." My heart clenched. "Can you see who?" "Not clearly, but based on the silhouette, it could be an elderly woman." Detective Santos touched my arm. "Mr. Reed, I need you to stay back when we approach. If your brother is inside and he's armed, this could get complicated quickly." "He's not armed," I said. But the truth was, I didn't know. The Victor of my memories was many things, but he wasn't violent. Then again, the Victor of my memories had never done anything like this. "Stay back anyway. Let us do our job." We moved closer, using the trees for cover until we reached the edge of the property. The farmhouse was old but well maintained, with a wraparound porch and curtained windows. Through one of those windows, I could see the outline of a figure in a wheelchair. A wheelchair. My mother didn't use a wheelchair. She had never used a wheelchair. She had prided herself on her mobility, on her daily walks around the neighborhood, on her refusal to let age slow her down. What had Victor done to her? Detective Santos approached the front door, flanked by Sandra. I watched from behind a tree, every muscle in my body screaming to run forward, to push past them, to see with my own eyes what was happening inside that house. The knock echoed in the morning silence. For a long moment, nothing happened, then the door opened. I didn't recognize the man who answered at first. He was younger than Victor, maybe mid-30s, with the hard face and wary eyes of someone who had learned not to trust unexpected visitors. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of the interior, sparse furniture, medical equipment, the sterile anonymity of a room designed for function rather than comfort. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Detective Maria Santos, Hamilton Police. We're looking for Margaret Reed. We have reason to believe she may be staying at this property." The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I don't know anyone by that name." "Is that so?" Santos held up a document. "Because we have records showing this property was rented by Victor Reed, who also holds power of attorney over Margaret Reed, and we have a neighbor's statement saying he saw an elderly woman being brought here 4 months ago. I think you'd better leave." "I think you'd better let us in." Santos's voice hardened. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. The hard way involves a lot of paperwork, a warrant, and a much more thorough investigation into your role in whatever's happening here." The easy way involves you stepping aside right now. The standoff lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Finally, the man stepped back, opening the door wider. And there, in the living room of that farmhouse, sitting in a wheelchair with a blanket over her legs and a vacant expression on her face, was my mother. Mom. The word tore out of me before I could stop it, and I was moving, pushing past Detective Santos, crossing the room in 3 strides. Mom, it's Michael. I'm here. I found you. She didn't respond. Her eyes, which had always been so sharp, so full of intelligence and humor and life, were dull and unfocused. She looked at me without recognition, without comprehension, as if I were a stranger who had wandered into her field of vision by accident. What did you do to her? I rounded on the man by the door. What did you give her? She's just sedated, he said, holding up his hands. For her own safety. She gets agitated sometimes. Sedated. Emily had come in behind me, and her voice was ice. You mean drugged. You mean kept in a constant state of cognitive impairment so she couldn't fight back, couldn't tell anyone what was really happening to her. I'm just the caretaker. I don't make decisions about her medication. Victor. Where is Victor? Detective Santos asked. He was here yesterday. Said he had business in the city. He'll be back tomorrow. No, he won't. Santos was already on her radio calling for additional units, for medical support, for all the machinery of justice that would descend on this farmhouse and everyone connected to it. He'll be in custody by tonight, if I have anything to say about it. I barely heard her. I was kneeling beside my mother's wheelchair, holding her hand, searching her face for any sign of the woman I knew. She was in there. She had to be in there. Beneath the fog of whatever they had given her, beneath the months of isolation and fear and forced helplessness, my mother was still alive. I'm going to take you home, I told her. I'm going to take you home, and you're going to be okay. I promise. Her hand twitched in mine, just a slight movement, the barest suggestion of a squeeze. But it was enough. It was more than enough, because she had heard me. Somewhere in there, behind the chemical curtain they had drawn around her mind, my mother had heard me, and she knew I had come. The next few hours were chaos. Paramedics arrived to transport my mother to Hamilton General, where Dr. Metz, chastened and horrified by what his diagnosis had enabled, personally oversaw her admission and the process of weaning her off the sedatives she had been given for months. Emily rode with her in the ambulance, holding her hand, while I stayed behind to answer questions from Detective Santos and watch as the farmhouse was processed as a crime scene. The caretaker, a man named Daniel Frost, who had a history of working for people who didn't ask questions about the legality of their request, talked after about 2 hours of questioning. He told us everything. Victor had hired him 4 months ago, right after the guardianship papers were approved. His job was simple: keep Margaret Reed sedated, contained, and invisible while Victor systematically dismantled her life. The drugs had been provided by an associate of Victor's, a pharmacist who had lost his license years ago, but still had access to supplies. The dosing schedule had been carefully calibrated to keep her compliant without killing her, not out of any concern for her well-being, but because Victor needed her alive long enough to complete his financial transfers. The plan, as Frost understood it, was for Victor to fake Margaret's death once the money was safely out of reach. He would produce a body, not hers, but a Jane Doe that another contact had access to through a funeral home, and bury it with full ceremony. The insurance policies would pay out, the estate would be settled, and Victor would disappear to somewhere without extradition treaties, leaving behind nothing but debts and devastation. It was monstrous. It was calculated and cold-blooded and utterly without conscience. And when I heard the details, I had to step outside the farmhouse and stand in the frozen field for a long time, just breathing, just trying to process the fact that my brother, the baby I had watched take his first steps, the boy I had protected from bullies, the man I had tolerated for decades despite everything, was capable of this. "Mr. Reed," Detective Santos had followed me out. "We've located your brother. He's at his apartment in Toronto. Officers are moving to arrest him now." Good. The word came out flat, emotionless. I didn't feel anything, or rather, I felt too much to sort through. A tangle of rage and grief and bitter vindication that would take years to unravel. "You should know, we found something else at the farmhouse, a flash drive in Frost's possession. He was supposed to destroy it, but he kept it as insurance, in case Victor ever decided he was a loose end that needed tying up." "What's on it?" "Documents, financial records, communications, a timeline of the entire scheme. Everything we need to put your brother away for a very long time." A flash drive, a little piece of plastic and circuits containing the evidence of my brother's crimes, the proof that would destroy him. It seemed fitting, somehow. Victor had always believed he was smarter than everyone else, that his charm would carry him through any situation. He had never learned that some things couldn't be charmed away, couldn't be lied about, couldn't be outrun. "And my mother?" I asked. "What happens to her now?" "That depends on her recovery. If she regains full cognitive function, which the doctors say is possible now that she's off the drugs, she may want to press charges herself. Either way, she's going to need support. Someone to help her rebuild what your brother destroyed." I thought about my mother's house sold to strangers, her bank accounts drained, her life dismantled piece by her own son. And then I thought about what mattered, what really mattered. She was alive, she was going to be okay, and she was going to wake up and find her family waiting for her, the family that had fought to find her, that had refused to accept the lies, that had chosen truth over comfortable ignorance. That was worth more than any house, more than any bank account, more than anything Victor could ever have stolen. "I'll be there," I said. "I'll be there for whatever she needs." It took 3 weeks for my mother to fully emerge from the fog. The doctors had warned us that it might take longer, that months of sedation could have lasting effects on an elderly brain, that we should prepare ourselves for the possibility that she might never fully recover. But they didn't know Margaret Reed. They didn't know the steel in her spine, the stubbornness that had gotten her through the death of a husband, the raising of a difficult son, the 7 decades of challenges that life had thrown at her. On the 21st day, I walked into her hospital room to find her sitting up in bed, eyes bright and focused, with a cup of tea in her hand and a smile on her face. "Michael," she said, and her voice was stronger than it had been, clearer. "I was wondering when you'd show up. Did you bring butter tarts?" I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in weeks, and it felt strange in my chest, like a muscle that had atrophied from disuse. "I didn't know you were accepting visitors." "I'm accepting butter tarts. There's a difference." She patted the bed beside her. "Sit. We have things to discuss." I sat, and then for the first time since this nightmare had begun, I cried. Not the quiet tears I had been suppressing for weeks, the ones that leaked out at night when no one was watching. These were great, heaving sobs that came from somewhere, deep in my chest, the accumulated grief and fear and relief of everything I had been carrying. My mother held my hand through all of it, just as she had when I was a child with a scraped knee, just as she had when Sandra died, and I thought I would never feel whole again. "I'm sorry," I said when the storm had passed. "I should be stronger than this." "You are strong." Her grip on my hand tightened. You found me. You didn't believe Victor's lies. You didn't give up. I should have known sooner. I should have seen what he was planning. No one could have seen it. I didn't see it, and I'm his mother. Something flickered across her face. Pain, regret, the particular grief of a parent whose child has become something unrecognizable. I knew Victor had problems. I knew he lied, that he cut corners, that he always took the easy path even when it hurt others. But this? I never imagined he was capable of this. Neither did I. She was quiet for a moment, sipping her tea. Then she said something that surprised me. I knew, at the end, I knew what he was doing. What do you mean? When they came to take me away, the men in the van, Victor had drugged me the night before, put something in my dinner, I think, and I was confused, disoriented. But part of me was still there, still watching. I heard him talking to the doctor, explaining my symptoms. I heard him on the phone discussing how to move my money. Why didn't you fight? Why didn't you tell someone? Because I wanted to see. Her eyes met mine, and there was something fierce in them, something that made her look not like a frail old woman in a hospital bed, but like the force of nature she had always been. I wanted to see which of my sons was really my son, which one would come for me, which one would choose love over convenience. I stared at her. You let this happen? You let Victor drug you, take you away, steal everything you had, just to see what I would do? Not just. She set down her teacup, her hands steady. When Victor first started pressuring me about the power of attorney, I knew something was wrong. I'm not stupid, Michael. I'm old, but I'm not stupid. So I started preparing. Preparing how? Moving money to accounts Victor didn't know about. Creating a new will with a lawyer Victor had never met. Documenting everything. Every conversation, every suspicious request, every sign that he was planning something. The flash drive, I said. Frost had was that was mine. She smiled, a sharp, satisfied smile. I gave it to him the first week I was at the farmhouse. I told him it was insurance, that if anything happened to me, he should make sure the right people saw it. I didn't know if he would keep his word, but I had to try something. Mom, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry or shake her. You could have died. Victor's plan, if I hadn't figured it out, then I would have died knowing the truth about my sons. Her voice was steady, unflinching. That was worth the risk. I needed to know, Michael. After all these years of loving Victor despite everything, of making excuses for him, of hoping he would change, I needed to know if there was anything left worth saving. And? She was quiet for a long moment, then softly, there wasn't. The son I raised died a long time ago. The man who did this, I don't know who he is, but he's not mine. Not anymore. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of 60 years of history. I thought about Victor as a child, charming and careless. Victor as a teenager, already learning to manipulate. Victor as an adult, leaving a trail of broken promises and burned bridges. Had there ever been a moment when he could have chosen differently? A turning point where the son my mother loved might have survived? I didn't know. Maybe that was the cruelest part, not knowing whether Victor had always been broken, or whether something along the way had broken him. What happens now? I asked. Now? My mother picked up her tea again, taking a long sip. Now I go home, not to my old house, that's gone, and I don't want it back, but to a home. Emily has offered to let me stay with her while I get back on my feet. I have money, more than Victor knew about, so I can rebuild. And I have plans. Plans? I'm going to make sure this never happens to anyone else. The way the system failed me, the ease with which Victor got power of attorney, the doctor who didn't look closely enough, The lack of oversight that let me disappear for months. It needs to change. I'm going to spend whatever time I have left fighting for that change." She said it matter-of-factly, the way she might have said she was planning to take up gardening or learn to paint. But I knew my mother. When she decided to do something, she did it with the same ferocity she brought to everything else. "I'll help," I said. "Whatever you need, I'll be there." "I know you will." She squeezed my hand again. "You always were the good one, Michael. I'm sorry I didn't tell you that more often." "You told me." "Not enough. Never enough." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I was so busy trying to save Victor that I forgot to appreciate what I had. A son who chose integrity even when it was hard. A son who came for me when no one else did. That's worth more than any inheritance. I stayed with her until visiting hours ended, talking about small things, rebuilding the connection that Victor's lies had tried to sever. And when I finally left, walking out into the cold Hamilton night with my coat pulled tight against the wind, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not happiness. That would take longer, would require more healing than a single conversation could provide. But peace. The quiet certainty that I had done the right thing, made the right choices, become the person my mother could be proud of. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough. Victor's arrest made the local news. It was a small story at first, buried in the crime section, just a few paragraphs about an Ontario man charged with elder abuse, fraud, and forcible confinement. But as more details emerged, as the scope of his scheme became clear, the story grew. By the end of the first week, it was being covered by national outlets. By the end of the first month, my mother was getting calls from advocacy groups across the country asking her to share her story. She said yes to all of them. I watched her on television, this woman who had spent 4 months drugged and imprisoned, speaking calmly and clearly about what had been done to her. She didn't seek sympathy or sensationalize the details. She simply told the truth, in the same unflinching way she had always told the truth, and let the facts speak for themselves. "I'm not a victim," she said in one interview that went viral. "I'm a survivor, and I want every elderly person in this country to know that they have rights, that no one, not even their own children, can take away their autonomy without consequences." The response was overwhelming. Emails, letters, donations to causes she supported. Politicians suddenly very interested in strengthening elder abuse legislation, a foundation being established in her name. My mother, who had spent her life as a quiet homemaker and grandmother, became at 82 years old an accidental activist. Victor, meanwhile, faced the consequences of his choices. His trial took place 6 months after his arrest in a Hamilton courtroom packed with spectators and media. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Emily on one side and my mother on the other, watching as the evidence was presented piece by piece. The prosecution's case was devastating. Financial records showing the systematic theft of my mother's assets. Medical testimony from Dr. Metz, who appeared as a witness against Victor and explained how the fraudulent dementia diagnosis had been obtained. Daniel Frost, who had turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence and provided detailed testimony about the conditions my mother had been held in. And then there was the flash drive, the one my mother had secretly compiled over months of captivity, documenting every conversation she overheard, every interaction that revealed Victor's plans. It was the smoking gun, the undeniable proof that he had acted deliberately, with full knowledge of the harm he was causing. Victor's defense, such as it was, amounted to little more than character attacks and desperation. His lawyer tried to paint my mother as mentally unstable, tried to suggest that her testimony was unreliable, tried to shift blame onto Frost and the other co-conspirators. But it didn't work. The evidence was too overwhelming, the truth too clear. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Elder abuse, fraud, forcible confinement, criminal breach of trust, obstruction of justice. A laundry list of charges that, taken together, represented the complete destruction of everything Victor had built his life around. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. I was in the courtroom when the sentence was handed down. I watched Victor's face as the judge spoke, looking for some sign of remorse, some indication that he understood the magnitude of what he had done. But there was nothing. Just that familiar expression of wounded entitlement, the same look he had worn his entire life when the world failed to give him what he thought he deserved. He turned to look at us as he was led away, at me, at Emily, at our mother, and for just a moment our eyes met. I don't know what I expected to see there. Hatred maybe, regret, some flicker of the brother I had once known, buried beneath all the choices that had led him to this moment. What I saw was emptiness, a void where a human being should have been. And then the door closed behind him, and he was gone. 6 months after Victor's conviction, I drove to Hamilton to have lunch with my mother. She was living in a small apartment near Emily's house now, a bright space with big windows and plants on every surface. She had recovered fully from the months of sedation, her mind as sharp as ever, her wit as cutting. She had, against all odds, found a way to thrive in the aftermath of what Victor had done. "You look tired," she said when I arrived, studying my face with the critical eye of a woman who had raised 2 sons and had long ago learned to see through their excuses. "Are you sleeping?" "Not always," I admitted. The trial, Victor, everything." I sat down at her kitchen table, accepting the cup of tea she placed in front of me. "I keep thinking about the moment I got that phone call, when Victor told me you were dead, and I keep asking myself, what if I had believed him? What if I had accepted it and moved on? But you didn't. I didn't, but I could have. It would have been easier, less painful." My mother sat across from me, her hands wrapped around her own cup. She had aged in the past year, the lines on her face deeper, her movements a little slower. But her eyes were the same, sharp, knowing, full of the intelligence that Victor had tried to bury but could never destroy. "Michael," she said, "do you remember what I told you when you were a little boy? When Victor broke that vase and blamed you for it? You told me you believed me, even though Dad didn't. Yes? And do you remember what else I said?" I thought back, trying to reach across the decades to that moment. A 10-year-old boy, wrongly accused, standing in his mother's kitchen with his cheeks burning from the injustice of it. "You said that truth has weight," I said slowly. "That lies are light, easy to carry, but truth is heavy. And the people who carry the heavy things are the ones who can be trusted. You've always carried the heavy things, Michael." Her hand reached across the table to take mine. "You've always chosen the harder path because it was the right one. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. I'm not sure I feel like that person right now. I feel like I failed somehow. Like I should have seen what Victor was doing sooner, should have stopped it before it got this far. You didn't fail. You succeeded. Against a scheme that was designed specifically to keep you in the dark, you found the truth. You saved me." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who had stumbled through a nightmare and somehow come out the other side, scarred and exhausted and forever changed by what he had witnessed. But my mother's words meant something. Her faith in me meant something. "What happens now?" I asked. "For you, for all of us." "Now?" She smiled the same fierce smile I had seen in her hospital room all those months ago. Now we live. We do the work of rebuilding. We fight to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. The foundation, she nodded. We've raised almost $2 million already. We're funding research, lobbying for legislative change, creating resources for families who suspect their loved ones are being abused. It's more than I ever imagined. You're changing things. I'm trying. It's all any of us can do, isn't it? Try, show up, make the choices that matter, even when they're hard. I thought about that, about choices, about what they reveal, about who we become when we're tested. Victor could have made different choices, I said. At any point, he could have chosen differently. Yes, he could have. My mother's face shadowed with grief, not for Victor as he was now, but for the person he might have been, the son she had lost long before that phone call. That's the tragedy of it, Michael. Not what he did, but what he could have been. The life he could have had if he had ever learned that the easy path isn't always the best one. Do you think he'll ever understand that? I don't know. Maybe prison will change him. Maybe not, but that's not my burden to carry anymore. She squeezed my hand. I've spent 60 years trying to save Victor from himself. Now I'm done. Now I'm going to spend whatever time I have left celebrating the son who saved me instead. I felt tears prick at my eyes, not of grief this time, but of something else, something that felt a lot like hope. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Michael. I always have, even when I didn't say it enough. It's been 2 years now since that November morning when my phone rang at 6:47 and my world changed forever. My mother turned 84 last month. She's still sharp, still stubborn, still beating me at Scrabble every time we play. The Margaret Reed Foundation has grown beyond anything we imagined, funding programs across Canada, changing laws, saving lives. She travels to conferences, speaks to audiences, tells her story with the same unflinching honesty that has always defined her. Emily got promoted again, and then again. She's running her own department now, specializing in the same kind of fraud investigation that helped us find my mother. Sometimes she jokes that Victor's scheme was the best career boost she ever got. It's dark humor, the kind that helps us process what we went through, but there's truth in it too. Victor is still in prison. He won't be eligible for parole for another 8 years. I don't visit him. I don't write. Some people think that makes me cold, heartless, unable to forgive, but they don't understand. It's not about forgiveness. It's about choices. Victor made his choices. He chose greed over love, lies over truth, easy over right. He chose to drug his own mother, to steal her life savings, to tell his brother she was dead and walk away without a backward glance. And I made my choices too. I chose to question, to investigate, to refuse the comfortable lie when it would have been so much easier to believe it. Those choices defined us both. They revealed who we really were beneath all the years of family dinners and holiday cards and the polite fictions we told ourselves about brotherhood and blood. I think about that sometimes when I'm walking along the Toronto waterfront in the morning, watching the sun rise over the lake. I think about the moment in my kitchen when Victor's voice came through the phone, offering me an escape from the responsibilities of family. A mother dead, a grief to process, and then move on. It would have been so easy, but easy was never my path. My father used to tell me that a good bridge isn't the one that looks the prettiest or costs the least. It's the one that holds up under pressure, that carries the weight it was designed for, that keeps doing its job long after the glamorous parts have faded. I've tried to live my life that way. Solid, reliable, built to last. It's not exciting, it doesn't make for dramatic stories at parties. But when the storm comes, and the storm always comes eventually, it's the solid things that survive. Victor thought he could tear our family apart. He thought he could erase our mother, pocket her wealth, and disappear into some new life where the consequences of his actions would never catch up with him. He was wrong, because real family isn't built on blood or inheritance or the accidents of birth. Real family is built on love, on integrity, on showing up when it matters most. I showed up. Emily showed up. Even my mother, drugged and imprisoned and stripped of everything she owned, found a way to show up, to document the truth, to believe that someone would come for her, to survive long enough to see justice done. That's the lesson of this story, if there is one. That's the weight I'll carry for the rest of my life. The truth is heavy, the right thing is hard, and the easy path is almost never the best one. But if you choose the heavy, choose the thing. If you choose the hard thing, if you show up when everyone else has walked away, you might just save someone. You might just save yourself. My mother called me yesterday. It was late afternoon, the light going gold in the windows of my Toronto house, and I was reading a book about bridge design, old habits, you know. "Michael," she said, "I just wanted to tell you something." "What's that?" "I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you, but I wanted to say it out loud while I still can." I held the phone to my ear and looked out my window at the maple tree, its branches bare against the winter sky. 2 years ago, I had stood in this exact spot and received a call that changed everything. Now I was standing here again, and everything was different. Everything was better. "I'm proud of you too, Mom," I said. "Good." I could hear her smile through the phone. "Now come to lunch on Saturday. Bring butter tarts. We'll play Scrabble. You're going to cheat. It's not cheating. It's called having a superior vocabulary." She hung up before I could respond, and I stood there for a long time, phone in my hand, smiling at nothing in particular. This is what family looks like. Not blood, not inheritance, not the obligations of birth. Love, integrity, showing up. Everything else is just details, in memory of all the mothers and fathers who are fighting, all the children who are searching, and all the families that are built not by accident, but by choice. If you or someone you know is experiencing elder abuse, please reach out to local authorities or elder abuse hotlines. The truth is heavy, but you don't have to carry it alone.